So many of us take for granted having access and using the internet to find out just about anything. I know I do. That's why Google is actually a verb. Just Google it. But for some, it's not that easy. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, a podcast featuring interviews with nonprofit and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. My hope is that you love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, or donate. Feel free to pass along any valuable information you hear on our podcast to others, and remember to send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at reachus@theintrinsicgroup.com. So, I can Google anything, but not everyone can. Over 4 billion people, that's close to 53% of the world's population, do not have any access to the internet. Having access is key to improving economic development and entrepreneurship. Our featured nonprofit for this Small and Gutsy podcast is World Librarians, an organization that bridges the digital divide by providing open access information through a process called commons-based peer production. Their goal is for schools and libraries lacking direct access to digital resources to be able to request information that they want to learn, and World Librarians searches open educational resources and shares that information. This means that folks in remote areas globally can tweet a request. The request is then researched and within a short period of time can be downloaded and used. I'm so very excited to introduce 4 guests today from the East Coast, Malawi, and Kenya. Charlie Schweik, co-founder of the World Librarians, Carl Meyer, co-founder of the World Librarians and director of Shift IT, a Malawi-based nonprofit, Rarusk, a current World Librarians user from a school in Kenya, and Mickey Cox, request manager. They are here to share the story of World Librarians, their passion and their partnerships, what a Rachel is, and how in the world to use a sneaker net, and even digital postage, all of which creates a seamless system in a digital world that currently lacks direct links. Charlie, Carl, who wants to start? Mickey?
Carl, do you want to start?
Age before beauty, Charlie.
Love it.
It's a long story. We've been working at this for 5 to 6 years now. The way UMass Amherst, myself and Carl met was through an earlier system that was called OuterNet. The OuterNet organization was renting 3 satellites and streaming open access data to the world. Think of it like the global positioning system, GPS system, similar. All you needed was a receiver to the OuterNet system, and you could receive any data that was transmitted. So it's a bit like radio, but think about anything being transmitted. It could be files, video. So I heard about OuterNet through an open access scholar named Peter Suber at Harvard. He talked about that, and immediately I thought, who decides what goes in that signal? And some listeners may understand the phrase sometimes called the global north versus the global south. And I was thinking, okay, is it the global north deciding what the global south can receive?
So for our listeners who are not familiar with the concept of the global north and south, it speaks to the geographic, historical, economic, educational, and political division between North and South. North America, Europe, and developed parts of East Asia disproportionately control global resources. Disparities of wealth, housing, education, digital media access, and numerous other factors underscore the power and privilege enjoyed by the global north, while the global south, representing the majority of natural resources and population, is excluded.
So because of that, I approached Peter Suber and asked him if he could get me in contact with the OuterNet folks, and that started the conversation with the OuterNet folks. At the same time, Carl was one of the people in Malawi actually using OuterNet, and so that's how we first connected. Carl, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, sure. We started Shift IT in 2015, and it was around about the same time Charlie and I met. We in Malawi had a need for delivery of data anywhere where internet signals didn't reach. And I had worked for a local internet service provider prior to that, and I knew the challenges throughout the country. Kenya, there was a different technology deployment, which also we started using around the same time. It's called KeyPod, which is a low-cost end-user device. That's also something we needed. We needed a low-cost end-user device coupled with a low-cost data solution that is available everywhere. And I learned about both of them by watching some BBC and thought, look, let me order some of the stuff and try it out and see how it works together. And we were the first organization in Malawi and I think Africa to combine the two technologies using OuterNet and KeyPod together. Plugged in the receiver, connected it to a satellite dish, which was already pointed at the right satellite. Most of the satellite dishes in Malawi used for television were already pointing to the right satellite. So we just swapped out the receivers and started downloading data, and it just trickles down and it records onto the receiver, and then users use their personal computing devices to connect to the receiver via Wi-Fi, and they could access the content. The content varied, some of it wasn't relevant to our communities, and I was also interested to see how we could maybe make requests for content that was relevant to the communities we were servicing in Malawi. I met Charlie on a community call, OuterNet community call, and we kind of, got together again after that call. We actually haven't met physically in person since we started working together, but we've had many video calls. We came up with the World Librarian system where I told Charlie, look, how about I get my communities to send you requests and let's use Twitter because it's the most data light medium to send, and I'll teach the guys on the ground how to use Twitter. They'll send a tweet, you guys get the tweet, your team searches for the contents and sends it to the OuterNet guys. They send it by the satellite. It lands at our village in the middle of nowhere that at least can see the sky and picks up that signal. And it was incredible. We managed to deliver some really helpful content to some very needy communities. Yeah, and then unfortunately the OuterNet, so they switched from their broadcast of using KU band, which actually utilized 7 satellites. They switched over to L band, which really diminished our delivery capacity. So we went from being able to receive 1 gig a day to down to 10 megs a day. We on our side also had problems even compressing files small enough for transmission. So yeah, we started looking at an alternative. Coincidentally, Charlie had the founder of World Possible visiting his university. He brought him a couple of test Rachel devices, and Rachel is a offline server that World Possible created, and it stands for Remote Area Community Hotspot for Education and Learning. It's a device that has a built-in hard drive, built-in battery, broadcasts Wi-Fi. You know, typically once you put it down at the location, you've already delivered a minimum of 500 gigs of content. So to put that in perspective, if we were using the OuterNet to try and deliver 500 gigs of content to a rural village, it would have taken more than a year at a gig a day. You know, it was great. We'd drop a Rachel in a community, it would have its own backup power and already a lot of content on it. But still, we wanted to deliver content that was relevant to the community's needs. So we continued using Twitter as a request medium. We assigned an individual at the location to manage a Twitter account. It was a lot of the times, the first time they ever used Twitter, you know, there was a bit of trouble also tracking which Twitter handle was making which request. So, and staying on top of each request and following up. I also had a friend of mine who worked at Salesforce, and he said he would create an app for us, which would help us make sense of all the Twitter conversations, grab specific tweets that are relevant requests, put them into a case which the teams at UMass can work on effectively, and then kind of do a lot of behind the scenes work on the request itself to help us keep track of what content was provided, by who, what kind of licensing does it have, are we legally allowed to transmit it, etc. So there was quite a lot of work that had to happen in the background, and our Salesforce app eventually took control of that whole process and is helping the UMass team to more effectively manage all the requests that do come in periodically. So we're quite grateful to Salesforce for helping us, get to this point where we're really, really effective now. Yeah, and then that kind of brings us up to the current period. We've had a lot of requests for new deployments. I'm 10 weeks away from deploying another 20 locations in Malawi with Rachel Plus servers. They will also get internet connections, part of a World Bank and Malawi government grant. We're quite grateful that we can spread access to these servers. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a very difficult time in Malawi with COVID numbers rising extremely rapidly, kind of waiting to see how safe it is going to be for us to travel throughout the whole country. Obviously, we will take all the necessary precautions when that time comes. We serviced not only schools, we also service other libraries in Malawi, healthcare facilities, community learning centers. The types of requests we've gotten, it's been quite different, and I think Mickey can talk a little bit more about all the requests. But yeah, we're extremely grateful to have partners like Charlie and Mickey and the entire team, UMass, as well as now our next guys in Kenya, Oryx, bringing them offline with us. and also we have a Ghana deployment. We've had interest from Cameroon, Tanzania, Botswana, a couple of countries. Yeah, it's inspiring to see other people wanting to follow and utilize the same tools that we've built and systems that we've built.
It's an amazing story from your very first, how you described, like you just tried it out with equipment. And I can only imagine, like Alexander Graham Bell, when it just worked, what it must have felt like to go, this works. And then from there, iterating it to replicating it, getting a larger capability to be able to stream it more seamless. It's just it's an amazing story, and amazing over 6 years?
About 6 years, yeah.
It's amazing. I would love to hear, because it sounds in a way like you've described your commons-based peer production because you have partners. I'm not sure whether that was kind of the description where you were going, so you can comment on that. And I'd love to hear from Mickey in terms of various requests.
Mickey, I'll turn it to you, but if I can just introduce something and then you can describe more. Laura, you were saying, there must have been a moment when you're like, wow, okay, we're onto something. For me, there were two. The first one might have been actually an outernet request before we moved to the other system with the Rachel device. And it's one of my favorites still in terms of requests. It's from, one of the things that Carl's doing unbelievably amazing stuff on the ground. He mentioned the KeyPod. These are little devices that he gives to each child, USB sticks. So each kid has their own computer in a way, that are very cheap, relatively cheap, $7 US. In the early days of this, one of the really vibrant early Malawi schools is a school named St. Michael's Girls. I think it's junior high school girls that are in that school. And we got one request really early on that was kind of proof of concept for me about the thing that with the idea of we're librarians, we're acting as librarians, simple as that. You go into a library, you're trying to find something you want, and you get a librarian. If you can't find it, you get a librarian to help. That's what the idea of the social side of this is, trying to get people to have internet access to find things that other people who don't have internet access want for whatever reason, to better their lives or whatever. And so one of my favorite early requests from St. Michael's Girls was, we want information on how to get a helium balloon into space. Now, the Rachel device has wonderful, wonderful open educational material, open access material. Khan Academy, Wikipedia is on it, all those things. But that particular request, I'm not sure is on there, and it would be awfully hard to find it if it was, I think. So that one was just kind of blew my mind a little bit. And we found stuff, including videos of other people who had sent like a Lego man into space on a helium balloon. And that's one of the remarkable things is we can send videos, which for many of these kids in Malawi, they might speak English. They don't read English as well. And so a video with audio is a really useful communication tool for some of the things they want to learn. That's one of my favorites from early days. And then the second one that really hit it home for me was we had a physics teacher who had been asking for a lot of different physics materials that we transmitted. A few years back, he tweeted to us, I think, that some of his kids competed in a national physics competition, some kind of competition, and they won. He attributed that's not all to World Librarians. That's to a lot to credit to the teacher and a lot of credit to what Carl's doing on the ground. But some of it was that some of the material we were sending helped those kids achieve that achievement. So those were, for me, two really moments that, hey, we're onto something. I'll turn to Mickey, who's been on the searching side and the management side. This is really not me doing this. These are our wonderful students at the University of Massachusetts who step up. And one of the top-notch ones that I've ever worked with is Mickey. So Mickey, I don't know if you want to talk about some of your experiences on the request side.
Yeah, so I have been doing or been helping out with request management for about, I think this is the first full year that I've done it, not necessarily without assistance, but this has been my primary role. Like I said, I've enjoyed every moment of working with this team and these people. And like Charlie says, like you get a diverse range of requests. So we've gotten requests for information on like how to make sanitary napkins. We received requests on how to make like mats out of trash. We've also received requests for like how to bake a birthday cake, how to braid hair. And it's interesting because, like I said, you never really know what you're going to get. But essentially, like my side of what I do is, like Carl was saying, was they communicate with us via Twitter. So part of my jobs and my duties is I check Twitter to make sure that we haven't any new requests come in. And if we have a new request, I let them know that like we've seen the request. And we have a team of students at UMass who helps me out with this. But essentially, I talk to other team members and we assign different requests to different individuals. And they find non-copyrighted open source resources.
Open source information refers to publicly available information appearing in print or electronic form, transmitted by radio, television, and newspapers, or it may be distributed through commercial databases, images, and drawings, which can be collected, retained, and stored without special authorization.
I have assistance from another team member who's not here right now, and they help me check the copyright to make sure that I can share this, that we're not going to get in trouble. And I just double check it for content as well to make sure that like this seems appropriate for what they're asking. And essentially I upload it back, and that's kind of my role in it. But some of the requests are really, really interesting. I think, Charlie, this might have been before me, but was there a request for how to build a wheelchair?
I think that was a request we received. Yeah.
One quick follow-up question is, when you have a request and you fill it, do you get sort of response back, or is there a loop closed, or do you see the result?
So we recently received a request that was for like medical information on, I don't remember the specifics of it, but it was something that was kind of like none of us on our UMass team are doctors. And so like a request like that, or even if we do fulfill a request, we're always asked like, do you need additional information, or like, do you want different content? Because like Charlie said, it's more about, we're not trying to dictate to other people what information they can have. It's like you said, we're librarians. So a lot of it is just, is this what you want? No, we can find you more. So after like a request is filled, we respond back to them via Twitter. And it's like your content's been uploaded. And then you ask as well, like, do you need an additional content? And depending on the location, sometimes they'll be like, we're all set. Sometimes they'll be like, we would actually like more in this topic, or we need videos rather than, like Charlie said, rather than like a document. So it really depends. Yeah.
That's great. It's really amazing. Bruce, I want to bring you into the conversation. You're in Kenya, and are you fairly new into this partnership? And what are the hopes for Kenya and the school system? I think you're in a school system, correct?
Actually, I'm not in a school system. So what I'm doing is I'm working with a school. It's an after-school program, actually. I've been doing this for the past 1 year. I met Charlie through an event whereby I was actually the rapporteur. I was just taking notes, listening to the amazing presentations that people were making. And then Charlie happened to make a presentation about, what they were doing in Malawi, how they were making kids in rural and very remote areas get some access to things online. And this is something that is quite close to me. And so I was like, I need to follow up on this and, ask if we can implement this in Kenya, because I was like, the situation is the same. I grew up in a remote area. I grew up in a rural area whereby we didn't have much access to the internet. And actually, I remember telling Charlie, my first course in college was computer science, but I struggled a lot to change to business admin. And part of that is because I didn't have a lot of exposure to computers. And so when Charlie made the presentation, I was like, what if I actually do something for the kids who are growing up in my place, the kids who are growing up in rural areas? So I asked him, is it possible to replicate whatever you guys are doing in Malawi? And that was in 2019, I think 2019, July. So he was like, yeah, sure. I have even one Rachel device. So he left a device. And with a couple of other guys, he was like, you guys give this a try and let's see how this comes along. Along the way, I think in 2020, because of COVID and all that, we were trying to brainstorm and see how we can actually implement the same World Librarian system in Kenya. And for me, I realized that there are actually two areas. There is not just the remote areas, because remote areas, they lack access to the internet. But there's also another group, the slums, the kids in the slums, the kids in other underprivileged areas, whereby even if they have access to the internet, they can't really afford it. So, and this system can really work perfectly for them. So Charlie and I and some other guys, we decided, how about now we actually, find ways through which we can help kids in even slums to get access to educational content through the World Librarian system. Charlie kept talking about the global north and global south concept. And we were like, there are some things that maybe we may want to request, but then guys like Mickey, they won't like, we ask like him, check for us how to make a mwiko. And then he'll be like, what is a mwiko? And so we were like, what if we actually like create a non-profit here that will work like Shift IT in Malawi? But in this case, we get the training from Mickey, from UMass about searching. We get the training from Carl from Malawi on how to implement the technical system. And then we came up with a nonprofit called NetBilanet. NetBilanet is like internet without internet. And I head that team here in Kenya. So we are implementing the World Librarian system. I think this will now be the year of implementation, because luckily with the help from UMass students and faculty and friends, we were able to raise some funds, which will help us actually launch our very first instance of World Librarian system in a place called Dandora Slums in Kenya. The school we are working with, or rather the after school program we are working with, is called Ndoto Zetu, or Our Dreams. And we have been working with those kids for the past 1 year, teaching them about how the World Librarian system works. They love it, and we have made a few requests. And I think that is what Mickey was like trying to say, requests such as making toys from trash, how to make braids and all that. And it has been very helpful. And actually, right now, I'm in the process of finding new locations. One of the locations we intend actually to go to is a place called Isiolo in Kenya. It's there is a school called Merti. It's in a very remote place. It's very far. So I think this one will serve as our area of checking the proof of concept for the remote areas. With the funding that we just received, we are going to be able to implement our pilot in Dandora slums. So the situation in Kenya is not as different as it is in Malawi. The schools got shut down in around March last year, and they just resumed actually this week. on Monday. And apparently some of the innovative, in quotes, innovative solutions that people are giving here is studying under trees, whereby kids are and teachers are being urged to study under trees to observe the COVID social distancing rules. And I think this is the high time whereby technologies such as the one we are using with World Librarians could actually be implemented, because you really don't need to buy the internet to actually use the system.
Those innovations that came out of open source allows collaboration across. I ask my students, how do we divide our work? We think of a private sector, public sector, nonprofit sector. How do we govern our world? Well, that's a little easier for them to answer. Well, we have local government, state government, national government, international, the United Nations or something. And what commons-based peer production, these principles allow us to do, coupled by the internet, is allow us to break those silos. So you can have people working in industry and nonprofit organizations and government at a local level, at a country level, at an international level. We don't need any of the structures that we use to organize our world for people to work together. And to me, fundamentally, as Carl said, we've never met each other. He's in Malawi, I'm in the United States. We've worked together for 6 years, and I often joke that I feel like he's my brother. And that's fundamentally what we're talking about when we're talking about commons-based peer production. It's about people who have a passion and an interest and want to solve problems like Carl did. And I don't mean to embarrass him, but I'm constantly inspired by what he's doing on the ground and what he's trying to do there in Malawi, and the same with Oryx. That moment in time when Carl and I met in the Outernet community, and then being able to, because we have the internet access, being able to collaborate. And through this 5 to 6 years, Carl's been the most successful. He's been piecemealing, if I understand it, Carl. When you want to build a new school, you figure out, okay, how can I get some funding to help me do this? And it's been a real piecemeal effort. We've gone 5 to 6 years with really no established funding for this project. And we've achieved it because we've met, we're passionate about it. We know we're onto something that might solve some of these really critical information need problems, and we keep chipping away at it. And that at the heart is what the commons-based peer production concept is. I don't think a lot of people have heard that phrase, but they know Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a commons-based peer production system. It's a new way for the world to collaborate, and you don't need big teams, as we're a relatively small team, hopefully making a difference. I think we are.
Absolutely. And I think you said it so beautifully. It's the passion that have brought you together to solve an issue that really should be solved for the betterment of our global society. I mean, you did it it's incredible. You mentioned funding, so I want to go there a little bit. Digital postage. Help me understand what that is and how people can support you.
Well, once we shifted, the Outernet system had this issue too, because they had costs to deliver through the satellite signal. But once we shifted to the workflow where we've got the Rachel devices deployed and using Twitter, what really hasn't been explained in this yet, I don't think, is that the way, maybe Mickey touched on it, the way we transmit files. So I think on average, Mickey, correct me if I'm wrong, but on average, a request, it's something around 800 megabytes, 3 or 4 videos or something, and some other stuff. When Mickey transmits, when we find the content we want to send, we put it onto a Google Drive folder, or now we're also using something called Calibri, which Carl could talk more about. So we're all connected to the internet. So we use the internet, transmit it through Google Drive. But the big problem is that the requester is typically someone that's in a remote area who often may be going to an internet cafe to get internet access. And that's where they're doing their tweets. But then on the back end, when we get the information to send to them, they have to download that and then upload it to their Rachel device. So I should have realized straight away, that was a substantial cost to some of these teachers in rural Malawi, to download 800 megabytes on their own personal cell phone device. So they may be using their cell phone signals to get this data often. So that's what the concept of digital postage is. So what we've moved toward, and this again, I've got to give shout outs to UMass students who sometimes this project evolves and we get just these awesome students who figure out the solution. We had a student named Scott at some point figured out that there was an app called World Remit, which allows us to actually do micropayments to cell phones in many countries of the world, including Malawi. So what we then piloted was this idea of, we've got a request where we're sending 800 megabytes. How much does downloading 800 megabytes on the Malawi cell phone system, how much is that costing the requester? We figure that out. Mickey transmits the data through Google Drive or this Calibri. We tweet that it's there. And then what I do in parallel is try to use some of my research funds that I have and use a UMass credit card and top off. Basically, it blows my mind that I can do this. If I know their cell phone number, I can top off 800 megabytes and a little bit more to give them a little thank you directly to their cell phone data plan. Carl was instrumental in helping us figure that out. We're still relatively new at that part of the cycle, but that's one of the areas right now, I'm just dipping in and using some of my research funds to pay for that postage. Ideally, we would create some kind of endowment or something that building interest that would cover the digital postage to allow these people to download their data.
Quick question, Charlie. I can't remember the conversion off the top of our head, but how much in US dollars does the conversion, do they have to pay in Malawi and in Kenya?
Yeah, I think it's somewhere around, I'm going to say 10 US dollars per transaction. Carl, does that sound right to you?
Yeah, unfortunately, data is quite expensive in Africa still. And before the whole paying for some of the couriers' data at Shift IT, we were taking the lead at downloading all the content requests and then dispatching it to the offline locations using the sneaker net. So I don't know if you're familiar with the sneaker net, but basically just using your sneakers on your feet to carry the data from point A to B, using a flash drive or a hard drive or your mobile phone, whatever it is, you're still moving. You're a part of the data chain. So after the outer net, we use the sneaker net mostly for deliveries, I'd say up into 2019, Charlie?
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but around about then we started moving more towards trying to make the data couriers a little bit more independent, using their smartphones to tether to their laptop. Somebody near the location can make a plan to get online and have now the funds available for their community. So with the outer net, it was great. We were delivering content from space, which is way cooler than delivering it via your sneakers. And just wanted to mention one other thing about our passion and our inspiration and the reason why we're doing what we're doing. I read the book, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but he's a Malawian kind of hero. He had a movie made about him, and his name's William Kamkwamba, and he came from this very rural village called in Wimbi Kasungu. Yeah, his family couldn't afford his school fees. He had to drop out. I was actually in Malawi during the same time that the book is based in, and I recall the drought and the famine and the hard times in Malawi. It was a future that he didn't want to accept. And he went to the local library, which I had visited. It's just a small little room with a couple of books on the shelf. He got a book called Using Energy Efficiently. Took that book home, couldn't even read English very well, but from the pictures and diagrams, managed to build himself a windmill to pump water up and generate electricity, and just changed his life completely. And I just always thought to myself, man, if this kid can change his whole life by just reading one book, what can other kids in Malawi do if they had access to the internet and could request whatever content they needed to change their lives. And I had this crazy idea. Let me reach out to William, and I did, and he responded, and we actually met just before I founded Shift IT. And once I met him in person and realized what an individual he was, and that it was a complete genuine story, he kind of gave me the blessing. He was the first person that I showed the combination of the outernet receiver and a keypod to, and wow. I got his nod of approval, and his school actually was one of our first deployments also in Malawi. So yeah, it's driven us to try and find some more William Kamkwambas in Malawi, and we've stumbled upon some amazing kids with amazing abilities and just needed content and knowledge to refine their skills. So we know we're having a positive impact in Malawi, and we're hoping we can continue having a positive impact over the whole continent.
You really shared with that example the connection between economic security, entrepreneurship, curiosity, the ability to give an opportunity and see where it goes, planting a seed, but having the seed is the first step. As always, with Small and Gutsy, we have a round of our quick Gutsy questions. They're super quick. Answer whatever's on the top of your head, or you don't have to. Can't respond with money. Give me the first thing that's on the top of your wish list.
People.
Great.
Yes, people.
So if I understand, people to use it, people to get involved, people to learn about it.
Yes.
Great. Who else?
I was going to say staffing.
Perfect.
But this is all connected, obviously, to money often. But one of the things I think Waruk's mentioned was that sometimes there'll be a request that the UMass team can't answer or doesn't really understand. And this goes back to the global north, global south. What we want to do is move toward having searcher teams in country, teams that have internet access in country, like in Malawi, there's universities that have students. So that's kind of getting at the staffing, at least in part, for the request type things.
That's great. And these are for quick round, but that's like volunteer staff in various countries or regions. That's great. Mickey.
I would say information, because I know Charlie completely introduced me to the idea of like commons based peer production or just open source anything. And I know personally that like I would have immediately joined if I had known what any of this was, but like I had like just education, just knowing what the idea means. Just if you say common based peer production or open source, just knowing what that entails, knowing what the idea means.
Right. Good. Carl, what's your top of your wish list? No money. Can't say money.
Can't say money. Can I say funding?
You're really trying to push me, aren't you? I'm going to let it go this time, Carl.
Sorry, I just wanted to add. I mean, like Charlie said, we've done what we've done on less than a shoestring budget. Our technology is low cost, recycled computers and flash drives. Waruk's actually created his own keypod in Kenya just quite recently. He managed to create his own keypod devices there. So, with a very small amount of money, we've made a massive impact. Money, unfortunately, it is the enabler. It helps us do what we do.
Carl, don't you use recycled laptops in the computer labs and that type of thing? So donated equipment?
Yeah. So the keypod machines are laptops and desktops that have been recycled that have no hard drives in them. So each user has their own independent keypod device, and that is their operating system. That's their memory. They leave no trace of their usage afterwards. It's their privacy. They take all their data with them. It's a mobile device. And we needed something that was robust and that was going to last in Africa. And this has really lasted the test of time. Once a user has their own personal device, it kind of changes things from using a shared device.
If you were to think of a song that describes World Librarians, what would it be?
There was this song, the football song by Shakira. I can't remember. What was it? What?
Yes, I know exactly what song you're talking about.
That one.
Waka Waka.
Waka Waka, yeah.
The one that popped in my mind was "We Are the World."
I love it.
Marux is a musician. Maybe Marux, you should sing it.
That's great. Yeah. What makes your organization, what makes World Librarians gutsy?
Flexibility.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find one word that describes it, but yeah, we've just been hacking away at this for 6 years, making progress in big steps and little steps. So what's a word for that? I don't know.
I think just like because we're actually doing it, like just even like I didn't even know that Warux like was using recycled material to make his own Rachel device. Just going out and doing stuff of that level, just not letting it stop you.
Well said, Mickey. Humans have this inherent desire, I think, to help, and that's what's so inspiring. Well, again, Carl and Warwick's on the ground. That's driving what they're doing. I'm inspired every single day by the students at UMass that just step up and say, "I want to help with this." When in a time when I think we're all looking for as much hope as we can find, it gives me such great hope for the generation ahead. And there's just the World Librarians as a proof of concept on what these upcoming generations harnessed with the technologies they're growing up learning and using can do. The world is much smaller now. People need to realize there's so much hope with that, and our ability to connect, to find people who are passionate about the same problems, and our ability in a global way, literally, to work together.
I feel like a lot of times in terms of like social impact groups or nonprofits, people get really intimidated because they think it's going to be just like, it's going to take all of your life all the time, 100%. And that like, if you're not going all of it and thinking only about one thing, like you're not actually doing anything. But one thing I think I really like enjoy about the World Librarians is 30 seconds of your time will make a difference. Listening to somebody, just listening to what the idea is, has already made a difference. Because I think, like I said before, I don't think a lot of people know or even understand like what copyright is, what like open source is, any of that. And so one thing about World Librarians is it's so simple to help. And literally any contribution that you can give will help in more or less a way. Like if you can't give money, can you give your time? And it doesn't even have to be hours and hours and hours a week. So for example, Pavel assisted with search before, and it took maybe 30 minutes, but he helped contribute to this cause. And it sounded really intimidating at first when I explained it to him, but just doing it and actually participating is the simplest thing in the world. Any type of help essentially helps. Like it doesn't have to be, you don't have to cut off an arm. You don't have to donate vials and vials of blood. It's just give 5 minutes. Our team, exactly what Charlie said, we want to help and we want to like inspire hope and make sure that like you walk away from us feeling good or decent or like that you learned something. When I joined the World Librarians, like I said, I had zero knowledge at all of what common-based pre-production was, anything about copyright. I didn't really know too much about databases or necessarily like I know how to use like a computer and a smartphone just because it's my generation. But the team members, they're all fantastic people. They want you to do well. So they take the time to actually teach you what you need to do because it's people who care. And so even if you think that you might not have any skills or like your skills might not be suited, we have a team member who made our website for us, and she had very little experience prior to that with how to make a website. But we had people who would help her with that, and we had resources. And it's just kind of about exactly what the World Librarians is trying to do. Is just you don't understand how much information you have with your phone at the tip of your finger. Whereas you can take someone who knows nothing about copyright, you can take someone who has very little experience with making a website, and now they've made a website for the World Librarians. Or now like I'm assisting with search management. And like part of my duties are understanding certain copyright stuff. So it really is just like, we want to teach and we want to help.
Thank you all. If you could get one celebrity or influencer to endorse or talk about World Librarians, who would it be?
I hope Elon Musk listens to this podcast. I also hope that he hears my South African accent and maybe decides to help our cause by giving us some first access in Malawi to his Starlink network. That would be really fantastic for us to be able to service requests and get access to people who need it.
Laura, I know you want short answers, but can I tell you a funny story on this one? So another one would be Leonardo Dicaprio, and this is why. We got a request from one school that was, we want information on celebrities and on ecology. It was the same request, one tweet. We want information on celebrities and ecology. So our UMass team was thinking, well, the first thing we were thinking about, wait, we want information about celebrities. So in some ways, kids will be kids, right? Wherever we are in the world. But we were joking, we didn't want to be the world, we didn't want World Librarians to be the People magazine. So, okay, let's focus a little bit more on the ecology question or something. I'm not sure if it was ecology, but something like that. So finally, we decided, okay, to respond to this, let's get a video of Leonardo DiCaprio talking about climate change.
I love it. It's great. It's perfect. Another one would be Matt Damon and his water project. Right? I mean, we could get, so hopefully they'll all be listening and you'll be set. That's what I'm hoping. So what's the best way for people to reach you?
For me, I would say Instagram or Facebook. For Instagram, it's net_bila_net. For Facebook, it's just net_bila_net.
So my email is cschweik@umass.edu. I'm happy to entertain any emails of interested listeners.
So you could tweet us. We're watching Twitter.
At WL capital _U and then mass.
Thank you. We hope that this brings you a little more visibility as the word spreads, and it'll be a story that you can post on your individual social spaces. And our goal is to get people to learn about you, support you, volunteer, other universities maybe to really think about this, Charlie, and say, how can they donate at least energy, time, information, and resources? Because what you're doing is incredible.
Thank you.
It's really bringing life to places that wouldn't have access otherwise. And it's what we take for granted. And as I said earlier in the podcast, Google's become a verb, and that it should be that way for everybody.
I want to thank World Librarians, our guests Charlie, Carl, Rarusk, and Mickey for talking with me and inspiring me today, and hopefully inspiring you. Our blog of these small and gutsy nonprofits and small social impact organizations can be found in the organizational stories section of the Intrinsic Group website, so that we can continue to link clients, volunteers, future employees, and donors to the small but mighty network. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview. So before you sign on to support or work for them, we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. We just want you to learn about the small and gutsy nonprofit and social impact organizational sector so they can spread their story and their impactful work. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group staff and volunteers, my co-producer, sound engineer, and composer, Pavel Franson, my graphic designer, Nate Addy. Please check out their bios on the Intrinsic website, and all the folks, friends, and family who've guided and inspired me. And thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share with your friends, give us some stars, and write a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy New Year and stay healthy. I'm Laura. Thanks for listening.